Pornhub put out a report that the most amount of gay porn that was consumed in the world was out of Pakistan. In Iran, there's IRGC and then there's a Basij. There's a guy that was a Basij, volunteer militia, right? And this guy was on a hidden camera with his face blocked out, and he basically blew the whistle that the mullahs are the older guys and then the Basij are younger boys, and they basically have these meth parties that are giant orgies. There's like hundreds and hundreds of these old mullah men and younger Basij boys, and they smoke meth, and it's just a giant orgy. And then he just thought it was crazy because the next day, the Basij are going killing people and the mullahs are on the pulpit like everything's fine. And one of the reasons they're able to just indiscriminately kill so many people is because they're high on meth.
Today's guest says the American dream is not theoretical for him, it's personal and it's at risk. I don't normally talk about politics, but today's guest I could not ignore. Abteen's message is simple. Freedom isn't permanent, and it depends on who's willing to fight for it. Abteen, welcome to the Better Call Daddy show. I am really excited to record with you because this is my first podcast since I've moved out of Houston, and we actually were at the same event this week. Talk to me about how you ended up at that event.
Yeah, sure. So it's funny. I don't know if you know this, but I ran for Congress. Decided the day the forms were due, December 8th, and my friend from law school, Abteen Vaziri, who is also a good friend of mine, told me if I ever ran for office, he was going to be my campaign manager. So, we went to kind of lunch with him and another friend. They used to work in the GW campaign, his first term, and so we all went, and they gave me the good, bad, and the ugly, and then Adam's like, listen, the goal is not really to win. Let's just run and get you a platform because. We spoke with a lot of Republican women's organizations, several of them in the DFW, and the number one topic that they were interested in is the threat and safety issues of the Islamification of Texas. So that was really my campaign message that I ran on. In fact, on all my cards, it said, "Stop radical Islam." Here's the crazy part. My first event I showed up, I didn't have my push cards because no one would print my push cards. The print company I was using is a company in Richardson, Texas, a white guy that I've been hunting with who is extremely Republican, who said he couldn't print my push cards because apparently he outsources his artwork to Pakistan. And I said, why not like Argentina? Why not like those other countries? And he goes, well, it's against the law. They can't print what you're saying. I said, I didn't say stop Islam. I said stop radical Islam. So they don't agree with that? He goes, apparently it's no. So, anyway, I showed up to this first event with no push cards, no business cards, and it was at someone's house, and all the candidates got to introduce themselves. And that's where I met all the other candidates, and that's where I met Benji. And so we talked, Benji and I spoke briefly, and now we've been to so many different events, and he's heard me. And he actually asked me to connect him with Tommy Robinson because Tommy Robinson, actually, I got connected to, interestingly, by Patrick Bet-David. I told him I was Christian, I was Iranian. I was born in Iran, in Tehran. 5 days after he was born, we moved to Germany like his family did. We moved to LA, same time his family moved to LA. And then I lived in Texas and, like him, and, New York for a little short time like him. So we had a lot in common. And then he actually, to his credit, opened his Rolodex to me and introduced me to a bunch of people, including Alice Jones and Anna Kasparian, some really interesting characters that, Michael Cohen and Chris Como. Anyway, I reached out to a lot, Michael Franzese, who was, by the way, very sweet, and I got to get back to him, actually. He actually sent me a really nice note. But the one person that said, hey, call me, I'm going to be in Texas, I'm going to come interview you, was Tommy. And he showed up the day of the election, an hour before the polls were about to close. And I was like, you got to do lives with the voters. I was like, I'm not going to win this election, but I got to go talk to Tommy. So I went to Tommy's hotel, which, funny enough, it was on the same street that my office is at. And so I went there, he interviewed me, and then they came to my office, interviewed me, and then they went to the Ken Paxton party. And so, I stayed in touch with Tommy, so I put him in touch with a few people. And he's just been such an amazing person. He doesn't say no, he works really hard. I know I got booed the other day when I said he works as hard as President Trump. Maybe not as hard as President Trump, because I don't think anyone works as hard as President Trump. But let me tell you, Tommy's been here in the U.S. for like 3 months, just from city to city, living off a suitcase. No event is too small. He's gone to everything, and because he really does care about this cause. And just hanging out with him, on to dinner with him. He's just a very simple guy. He's like, I'm not fancy. I just like meat and potatoes. Doesn't drink. Just a very humble, not snooty. Just down to earth. Working class guy who wants what's good for his country. He's seen his country go to crap. Listen, I'm a kid that was born a Muslim. I immigrated to Europe. I was one of these migrants, essentially, because they probably look at us all the same. And moving to the U.S., I was also, a political refugee. But the way I look at, immigration is that, and my father used to get physically angry when he saw people wearing hijab, because, hijab is something that's forced on you. If you're voluntarily wearing it in a free country, something may be wrong with you, I always been of the belief that, the United States has done us a huge favor. And my former country, Germany, that I lived in for 2 years, they did us a huge favor. So I almost feel like I have a duty not only to save America, but to save Germany, because Germany saved me. So as soon as we fix the problems here at home in the U.S., I'm going to do some work to fix Germany, because Germany gave us refuge in 1989 when we were political refugees. And the difference between us and some of the migrants they're letting in now is we wanted to be Western, we wanted to be American, we wanted to assimilate, but now they're letting people in that don't want to assimilate. And when you bring immigrants in that don't want to assimilate, that's not immigration, that's an invasion, and that's what's happening here in Texas.
What do you remember back to actually leaving Iran when you were a little boy? I mean, you were 9 years old.
I have this weird memory, and my mom is like, she's always baffled. My memory is like, just like I have photographic memory. I remember things. Like I remember things from when I was like 2 or 3 years old, like vividly. And I have crazy, like I remember people's names, I remember people's faces, I remember a lot. So I remember the escape process like vividly. And what had happened was we weren't sure my dad was going to be able to get out of the country, because he didn't break any laws. He was court-martialed, given a death sentence, but then he was given a pardon. But the caveat was, as long as he served, in the military, the death sentence was commuted or whatever, but that was part of the deal. So he waited until the war was over. He did his service, served, 8 years in the Iran-Iraq war. And then when the war ended, he put in for a resignation. Well, they rejected his resignation, which is like, imagine you're an indentured servant, you want to quit, they say no. So then, he found a loophole, because he had served more than 20 years, he put in for retirement. They couldn't reject his retirement, so he got retired. And then back then, it was in the 80s, right? There weren't computer systems that, there was still paper, documents were piece of paper. So he went to, very, very ballsy, went to the passport office. And, if you're a former military officer, especially high ranking, you can't get a passport. You're not allowed to have a passport. So he went in there and lied on the application and said that he worked at a metal shop and, made up a fake, and he got a, real passport. It wasn't a fake passport, it was a real passport, but it was under, fake information. And then here's the crazy part. I'm in the immigration business, in EB-5 business. People invest $800,000 in the U.S. and get a residency. Funny enough, that program started by Ted Kennedy in 1991, the year that I moved to the U.S. But at the time, that didn't exist. So we had to sell our entire life savings and bribe the people in the Austrian embassy and bribe people in the French embassy. My dad got a visa to Austria, and the goal was he was going to go a week or two before us so he could make sure he can get out. And then if he got out successfully, me and my mom and sisters would get out. And that's what he did. He went to Austria, and on his 70th birthday, I took him to Peter Luger Steakhouse in New York, and I got a glass of scotch, and they have a nice pour. And he told me this story, actually, how he, when he went to Austria, how he ended up in Germany. But he basically bought, there still was borders in Europe. It wasn't open borders. So he got 2 train tickets, one from Salzburg, which was on the border, to Munich, the other one back to Vienna. And then if somebody stopped him, he was going to say, oh, I got lost. But nobody stopped him, and he ended up in Munich, and then, went to Aachen, this town that we lived in Germany. And then me and my mom and sisters, we escaped. And my sisters were young. Like I was probably, 9. My sisters were like, 6 and 1, basically. And we went to Paris, and then a friend of my dad's who was in the Air Force with him, who was, funny enough, there were 2 brothers. Both of them were thrown in prison. One of them was one of the pilots that flew the Shah out, so he got in trouble for that. They basically kicked him out of the Air Force for that. And then his brother, his only crime was that he was the brother of the pilot that flew the Shah out. And so they shunned him and they threw him out. So that family, they had moved to Germany like a month before we had. And so he had a family member that, basically took us from Paris to another one of their family members to Belgium. We stayed a week in Belgium, and then from Belgium we snuck into Germany, and we actually got lost, went to Holland. So it was a whole ordeal, but we ended up in Germany. And then 2 days after we ended up in Germany, the Berlin Wall came down. And so we got to experience that. And then we came to the US in 91 as political refugees.
Wow. That's crazy. I want to hear more about that scotch that you had with your dad on his 70th. My dad is coming up on 70 right now.
Peter Luger's is a 225-year-old steakhouse in Brooklyn, and they're known for their very strong pours. So, they poured my dad a Macallan, and it was just like a whole glass. And then I think me and my dad had two, and it was like drinking half a bottle of Macallan, because they're like one of the restaurants that give you a really, really nice pour. And so, for the first time ever, he told me the story of how, he went to Salzburg, and he actually met a couple of construction guys. Because, my dad spoke fluent English. He'd been in the U.S., but he didn't speak German. And he found two guys that were construction workers. They spoke Farsi. They're like, you see that bridge over there? There's a tunnel. If you go underneath it, the other side's Germany. So, but they're like, if you just jump in the train, just go to Germany. So that's what he did.
Wow. That's sweet. I'm curious too, did you know any Jews in Iran?
I have a lot of Jewish Iranian friends now. I think we did have some family members that were Jewish, but they didn't tell anyone they were Jewish. I know people have no idea they were Jewish because they would hide their Jewish identity because they didn't want to be persecuted, right? Like I have a friend right now who actually is Christian now, and she's in California. She's actually also in the politics world, and she said that her whole life she had to hide the fact that she was Kalimi, which is Jewish, and then they basically pretended like they're Muslim. They had to, to survive. Then when they came to the U.S., they were openly Jewish, and she actually had her husband as American, so she converted to Christianity. But Jews are persecuted in Iran. Even the small community that lives there, they keep an eye on them, watch on them, and they can't be involved in any political stuff, and the government just cracks down on everything, right? Speech, prayers, all of that, right?
Right. I know you were young when you lived there, but I was wondering if you ever picked up on any of that.
No, I mean, I honestly didn't even, like, when I was a kid, I didn't really know, like, the whole concept of being Jewish or Christian, just didn't, like, ring a bell. Like, it wasn't until, like, I was in college in the U.S., and there was a guy who was, like, I was really nice to, and, he was nice to me. All of a sudden, he starts becoming a dick to me, and he was Israeli, and he just thought that I was, like, a Muslim. Later, he, talked to me, and he realized, no, we freaking hate Islam, and because, but I was like, why does this guy hate me? Like, I don't understand, and he didn't know. He just thought I had, I was somebody from Iran. I'm supposed to be the enemy. So it wasn't until, like, I was 18, 19 that concept even growing up. Religion wasn't ever anything that was part of our life, other than I know when I was in school in Iran, they force you to learn Arabic, and you have this religion class, which is basically an Islamic class. And I hated that class. It was one of my least favorite classes. I just couldn't stand it. My dad, who was just an atheist, he hated religion, he hated Islam. He would just curse out all the prophets at home. And my mom was like, you're going to get up in jail again. Stop it. My mom would always stop him because she's like, you're going to get us killed. Stop. And my grandfather too. My grandfather from my mom's side, he was a professional soccer player, played on Iran's national team in the 50s, played on goalie for one of the club teams in Iran. He also, and it's funny because his wife, my grandmother, was very, very religious, very spiritual. She would pray for all of us. And, she hated the government, the Islamic Republic, but she was very spiritual. And her husband was an atheist who just, on a daily basis, he cursed out all the prophets and, told us what he thought of them and, how they were all, a lot of expletives that I can't say.
Yeah, just like you had trouble getting business cards for your event, talk about some of the backlash that you've probably faced on social media.
Oh, it's funny. I'm in the EB5 business, so I have a lot of lawyers that I do business with. And apparently there's a group chat of these lawyers that are just talking all kinds of, funny enough, the two guys that, targeted me on LinkedIn and posted, I wrote a book on EB5 and I posted a screenshot of it to help investors, not get ripped off in EB5 deals, because a lot of investors get ripped off by these lawyers, by the way. And two lawyers who, by the way, they're Jewish. Jewish lawyers put a screenshot of my campaign that, it's not there on the website, so they had it, and they posted, "Are you going to explain this in the book?" And it said, "I'm going to close down every mosque in the United States." And they're basically attacking me because, they don't agree with my views. But these two guys that are attacking me both are Jewish faith, and it just blows my mind. But that tells you, people that are in New York, these blue states are brainwashed. I worked at a company in New York. This family became my family, and they were just so amazing. And it was Steve Rosenberg, and he owns one of the biggest lenders in New York City called Greystone and Company. And half the people, almost everybody that worked there at the time was Jewish. I moved there in 2015, and half the company was Orthodox Jewish, and half the company was New York Jewish. Well, let me tell you, the New York Jews, they didn't like me. The Orthodox Jews, they loved me because we sit there and I would eat kosher food and watch, Fox News with them. And they're like, "Why do you eat the kosher pizza?" I'm like, "Because the kosher pizza tastes better." So anyway, but the liberal Jews, they just thought that, my views were too extreme, and, Trump was Hitler. And it was just, they live in a bubble. I get it. I went to law school in New York, and, I was a little bit older than the average student in law school at Fordham. And I remember I just moved to New York maybe, a year before, and I was in a constitutional law class. And imagine I'm in, my mid to late 30s. Everybody else is in their early 20s because I've gone to business school early in life. This is my second time at grad school. And funny enough, in business school at SMU, I was the youngest one in my class at 176 students. In law school, I was one of the oldest ones, probably the oldest one in the class. But anyway, there were, the constitutional law professor, who, by the way, is an amazing professor. I think he's the dean or the assistant dean at Fordham now. His name is Joe Landau. And he asked, "Who do you guys think is going to win the election?" This is like the day before the election, or a couple of days before the election, our last class. And the big fight that was going on wasn't if Trump was going to win. The big fight was going on. Half the class said Hillary Clinton was going to win. The other half said it's going to be the biggest landslide of all time. And then I was chuckling, and the professor's like, "What are you chuckling about?" And I was like, "You guys are all clueless. Trump is going to win." They're like, "What are you talking about? All the polls, blah, blah." I said, "Listen, I'm not, going to discuss politics, but let me tell you, I just drove through middle America. I just moved here from Texas. I just drove through middle America, through Nashville, Virginia, all these places to move to New York. And you guys should go talk to some of these people and see how unhappy they are. And you live in New York where average salaries are higher. Everyone's doing generally well. The rest of the country's struggling. And you guys are just oblivious to that." And they shunned me. And, I was going to make a bet, say, "Hey, listen, I think Trump's going to win." But the fact that I was giggling, they were all so confused. And then the election happened, and people in law school wouldn't talk to me for 6 months.
What keeps you going? Like, what fuels your fire? I mean, with all this rejection and all this backlash.
Listen, it's not easy to be on the right side of history when the whole world is brainwashed. But what drives me is I know I'm right. I know God is on my side. I know history is on my side. Listen, these kids, and by the way, these kids, they're not bad people. They're just grew up in a sheltered environment in a city where there's bubbles and groupthink. I've lived in 3 different countries on 3 different continents. And then in the most amazing country in the world, in the United States, I lived in California, Texas, and New York. I've traveled to 42 different countries. I've been to China 30 times. I've been to 20 different cities in China. I've been to Korea 5 times. I've been to Vietnam 8 times. I've been to Turkey 5 times. I lived in Germany. I've been to Paris, London, India. I've been to India 5 or 6 times. I've been all over the world. And I've seen it from a lot of different angles. And the old saying is, they asked 5 wise men to identify what an elephant was by touching the elephant with a blindfold. And everyone thought an elephant. One thought an elephant was a trunk. One thought an elephant was the tail. One thought an elephant was the leg, because nobody got a clear picture, right? The people that in New York, they're not bad people. They're not dumb. They're just only holding the trunk, and they think the elephant is the trunk. Well, me, I've been to 42 different countries. I've zoomed out, and I've seen the whole picture, and I've made my own, judgment, my own deduction from everything I've seen. I've seen what countries that, have mismanagement that does to the people and the population. I've seen the countries that, like Singapore. I've been to Singapore. What an amazing country. It's like, I'm in the passport business. U.S. passport is $800,000 investment. A Singaporean passport is $8 million. It's literally the most perfect society. They have no such thing as racism. They created this concept where, there's 3 different, population centers in Singapore. A third are of Indian descent, a third are Chinese descent, a third are everything else, right? So the government has incorporated that everything is merit-based. There is no special classes of people. No one gets a free pass. Everyone has to get jobs and move up based on merit and ability. And, even buildings, you can't have more than 30% of a certain race because they don't want ghettos forming up or like, this is Indian only. I mean, look, we have that. We have Black communities, we have Hispanic communities, Persian communities, Chinese communities. And that's why we have racism, right? That's why some people just are in their communities. People are here from Iran for 20 years, refuse to learn English, and they only speak Farsi. People from Mexico, now Mexicans get a pass because Texas used to be part of Mexico. They're Spanish. They're people that are here. So that understand, but like people that only want to live in an African American community, it just doesn't make any sense. We need to be mingle with all the societies and all the people and understand different cultures. And when you have these neighborhoods where only one culture exists, that's where racism happens. I mean, look that's happening right now with the Indian community. The Indians have taken over H-1B, and H-1B, that's a whole other fraud that we could talk about. I'm in the immigration business. I've been in EB-5 business for 16 years. Another reason, by the way, these lawyers are attacking me is because a lot of them are involved in the H-1B business, and I'm outspoken, and that's their little honey hole. They don't like me talking about H-1Bs because they're all making a lot of money from it. These H-1B fraud, essentially, that's going on. Now, not all of it is fraudulent. There's a lot of fraud going on. I think the amount of fraud that's happening in North Texas, and I think there's more H-1Bs in North Texas than the rest of the country combined. But who hates these Indian communities forming the most? Indians. I'm serious. I have dear friends that I grew up with, I went to Plano Senior High with, that are, Americans. I mean, they were born here, and American Indians. And then there's Indians that I've gone to college with. They've been here a long, long time. They're, legal here. They have residency. They've been established. This new group of Indians, first of all, they're coming. A lot of them are, there's people don't understand. There's 290. The largest Muslim country in the world is Indonesia, which, by the way, they're peaceful. They're not radicalized. We just signed a military deal with them, which gives us access to one of the biggest choke points for oil. That's a whole other topic. 290 million in Indonesia, 30 million in Pakistan is the second biggest Muslim country. Then the third biggest Muslim country is India, 200 million Muslims. The most radicalized Muslims in the world are probably Pakistan and Afghanistan. The only ones that are more radicalized than them, actually the Muslims in India, because the atrocities they did killed a million Hindus. You got to read Dinesh D'Souza's books. But the ones that are there, because they've been going back and forth between the Hindus and the Muslims, they're crazy radicalized. The death threats that I get, most of them are coming from India. It's not Hindus, it's the crazy radical Islamists. Let me tell you who 2 of those families that were crazy radical Islamists, Indians. One, Ayatollah Khomeini's family, which was kicked out of India, they came to Iran. The other one, Ayatollah Mamdani's family, was kicked out of India and they went to Uganda. Why do you think they were kicked out of India? Because they were so radical. And these are 12th Imamers. They think the world needs to end. The people that Trump is negotiating with, they're 12th Imamers. They want the world to end. They think this is their opportunity to go to heaven. They want, you can't negotiate with these crazies. But the Indians that are here, they're like law-abiding citizens. They're paying their taxes. They're great members of society. And then the new generation comes, and a lot of these are of Muslim descent, and they're trying to build their own communities, and the Indians don't like it. And by the way, my cousins are Canadian from Vancouver. My cousin was talking to this Uber driver, and he was just being I thought my cousin was being like a little almost racist. And he goes, don't you hate the Indians? And he was telling this Indian Uber driver. And I was like, why would you say that? And then I thought the guy was going to get upset. He goes, don't you hate these new Indians? And the guy goes, yes. And it's the same concept in Vancouver. The Indians, by the way, in Vancouver, there's Indians that are 5, 6 generation Indians that have lived, 4, 5, 6 generations in Vancouver. They're like Canadian as it could be, Canadian to the core. I have a dear friend of mine from high school who is a special forces in the Canadian military and border security agent, and his family is one of those, been in India, several generations. But the new Indians that are coming, they're like the government is sending them, and they're coming there and they're intimidating the established Indians try to blackmail them, trying to blackmail property they have in India to try to get money out of them. Some of them are sent by their security forces in India. I mean, it's just, I had no idea. This all opened my mind. And people are like, oh, you're being racist when you're saying Frisco is gone. No, go talk to an Indian American who's been here 30 years, who's been here, who was born here, and ask them what they think of the new Indians that are coming here and ruining their reputation. We have some of the most brightest, most successful groups of people in the United States are Indian descent. Look, so many corporate Fortune 500 CEOs are Indian descent. Those guys don't like somebody coming here and breaking the laws and committing H-1B fraud and making them look bad. By the way, two of the most successful immigrant groups in the United States, I think number one is Indians and number two is Iranians.
What made you shift your focus from immigration to your focus now on like the more politics, like anti-Islam stuff?
There was three things that really motivated me. And when I told Adam, I said, Adam, I think something's going to go down in Venezuela. And by the way, my girlfriend is Venezuelan. Her family is Venezuelan. She's half American, half Venezuelan, of Italian descent, which is, it's complicated. She roots for Italy in the World Cup, but in the baseball World Cup, she roots for Venezuela. So, I get confused. But I told Adam, I said, listen, I think Venezuela, something's going to go down. I bet you in less than a year, Trump's going to do something about Iran. And this was in December 8th when we filed. And sure enough, we were right. And Adam and I think that, there's the old guard Republicans, the McCains and the Romneys and until I actually kind of like George W. Bush. I think he completely screwed up the whole Iraq plan. I know the plan was to go get Afghanistan, Iraq, and then go to Iran. But he screwed it up because he should have went to Iran first, then Iraq, then Afghanistan. You go get the head of the snake, then you get the tentacles out, right? He did it backwards, but he got so much backlash because of how they, mishandled Iraq so bad that they never got to go to Iran. So they screwed up. And the old guard Republicans, they don't have any backbone. And, the whole MAGA movement, I told Adam, 3 years from now, President Trump's going to be gone. That's best case scenario. We're going to have him in 3 years. And then it's going to go back to the old Bushies and the Romneys and the McCains. And I was like, I got to go make a difference. This is a terrible time for me to run for office. I'm not in a great financial position to run for office. I'm starting a new business, but I feel like I got to do it. And the three things that inspired me is, one, my father passed away a couple of years ago, and this stuff was so important to him. So I wanted to make sure he didn't have a voice. He didn't get to, he's just such an incredibly smart human being and so articulate and so smart, and he knew so much. And he never really got to, he just kind of kept quiet to himself and never really did anything with all that knowledge. He just passed it on to me. Two, when Charlie Kirk got assassinated, that really had a big impact on me because I just thought of him as a figure who wasn't divisive, who gave a microphone to his opposition. He just wanted to have dialogue and he wanted to be peaceful. And some evil forces took him out, and I just thought that was horrible. And I just think for every Charlie Kirk that's gone, we need to make sure there's 100 more Charlie Kirks. The old Persian Cyrus the Great military, they had these warriors called Javedan, or the immortals. When you killed one, another one replaced it. So the military is always the same number. That's how we got to treat Charlie Kirk. If they kill one Charlie Kirk, not only we got to replace another Charlie, we replace it with 10 Charlie Kirks, 100 Charlie Kirks. So I thought, I could maybe fill in some of those shoes. Obviously, no one, I don't think, could fill the void of Charlie Kirk, but I thought I could at least maybe fill 1% of it, right? And then the last one was seeing this creature with this fake smile, Mamdani. And I lived in New York for 9 years. And listen, New York had a couple of great mayors. I thought Bloomberg was a great mayor. Giuliani, even though he's gone a little cuckoo right now, I thought he was a great mayor. And then we went to de Blasio, who was just a crook. And from what I would hear from the real estate community, he's like he was in the pockets of, when he was in city council, he was in the pockets of these developers, and they thought they can control him. And then he went hardcore communist. And then another guy that they handpicked. And by the way, not to ruffle any feathers, but these are majority Jewish developers that created this mess. So, the liberal New Yorkers who created this mess, they created Mamdani. I mean, this is very controversial. If it wasn't for these guys who are so lefty that they brought de Blasio to control them and they couldn't. Then they brought Eric Adams, who was just a complete con artist and a crook. The guy would go to bottle service every night, spend $20,000 on bottle service on a mayor's salary. Where'd all that money come from? Everybody in New York knew the guy was a crook, but a few Jewish, very liberal developers got together and handpicked him, and that mistake that they made created Mamdani, because everyone thinks, oh, New York is in the hands of these few people, they're making decisions. So then it goes hardcore communist. But Mamdani winning mayor's race was the third reason I decided to run for office. And when I would go to these events in East Texas, places like that, listen, I went to Upshur County, Rockwall County. Rockwall County voted 78, 79% Republican. One of the most Republican counties in the country was in my district. Upshur County, 89%, probably the most Republican county in the United States. When I first went there, they were giving me dirty looks. They thought I was Mamdani. They were like visibly.
I was going to ask you if people ask you that.
Visibly not happy with me. Then I tell them my story. I got choked up a couple of times. Talk about becoming a Christian. And then I talked about water issues. I talked about.
You got a standing ovation the other night when you told that part of your story.
I never noticed it.
Yeah. I was like, wow, everybody stood up for that.
I just remember Benji was mad at me because I went over my time. But anyhow, like these people in East Texas, they didn't warm up to me right away. I told them, guys, don't judge a book by the cover. My name, Abteen, is not an Islamic name. I know you look at it, Ab, you think it's Islamic. It's not. Abteen means a seeker of truth. It's a Zoroastrian name from this book called Shahnameh, which is the Book of Kings. My name is illegal in Iran right now. You could not name your kid any name from that Book of Kings. You can't name your kids. It's illegal. They want Islamic names. The most common name in Iran is Muhammad, and the second most common name is Ali. Actually, maybe the other way around. Maybe Ali, because they're Shiites. Do you know who Ali was? Ali was a mass murderer of Persians. Ali had a sword that had two branches, and he, by that sword, killed more Persians than anyone else in the world. And Iranians today name their kids Ali, the murderer of their kids. It's like, imagine Jewish kids name their kids Hitler today. That's how, you know how stupid that is? And most Iranians don't even know. Imagine the person that massacred, genocided your people, you're naming your kids after them. This is the battle that's going on around. This is education 101. This is, when I go to the mosque, or I went with Frank Gaffney to the Board of Education, this Pakistani kid comes and tries to intimidate Frank Gaffney. And there was two other kids with him. I thought those two kids were Mexican. They ended up being Palestinian. And they were like, oh, we're all Muslim. And they're like, do you know what Sharia means? And Frank's like, I do. Do you know what Sharia means? And they were just like being like a little hunching over him, a little intimidating. Finally, I stepped in. I said, I know what Sharia means. Sharia means total submission. And they're like, no, you don't understand. You don't. I said, listen, you three little snot-nosed little kids, I grew up under Sharia law. I was born in Iran. I lived in Iran for 9 years. You kids have been reading a bunch of crazy books here. And by the way, I promise you little three snot-nosed little kids, I promise you can't read the Quran. I promise you I can read the Quran from start to finish more than you. And I promise you I know more than you. So sit down, And then the cops came, and I'm a threat to them because I can call their BS. I'm a threat to them because I can read the Quran. A lot of people have approached me recently, and they're like, we need to burn down all these Qurans, and we need to ban Qurans. I was like, listen, your idea, I'm not against it, but let me tell you why you're wrong. I was like, the Quran is actually a weapon that could be used against them, because one of the reasons the Quran and Islam cannot be studied or read in other languages is because it's a cult. It's a cult to export this backwards ideology and Arabic culture, right? And by the way, Arabic culture is great. I'm not saying I love Lebanese food. I love Arabic food. I love Arabic music and dance. Not to take anything from it, but the backwards ideology of Islamism, the people, Wahhabis, the people that followed Muhammad, and we can talk about that a little more. But if people were able to translate the Quran in other languages, if we translated the Quran and had a Quran reading like a Bible study, and people understood the garbage that was in the Quran and how radical and how crazy it was, that's the best selling point to say for people to be like, by the way, 1.9 billion Muslims in the world, maybe 300 million of them speak Arabic, actually know what the Quran says. The rest, everyone in Iran just memorizes the Quran. It's like they're essentially saying gibberish when they're praying because they have no idea what they're saying. If they actually read it, if they actually understood it, if it actually saw what it said, there's no way in hell they would follow some of the things that the Quran says.
Have you had a conversation with anyone who is currently Muslim and talked to them about your new beliefs in Christianity?
Oh, yeah. Many. It's been actually pretty humbling. Iran Alive Ministries, I did a show with them and we did a broadcast. They broadcast to 120,000 Christians that are just part of their ministry. They have another 7 million Muslims that watch their show. I have friends that are Baha'i or Muslim that are on the fence and they just need somebody to give them a little push. And I've been giving them that push. There's apparently like something like 3 to 10 million underground Christians in Iran. And I hear less than 5% of the population actually truly is a devout Muslim in Iran. So when Iran is free, mark my word, I think Iran is going to be a majority Christian country.
Do you think it's changed people's views towards Israel?
100%. Yeah, I mean, I think right now the most popular figure of the Iranian people is Netanyahu. Have you seen there's a famous Bibi kind of means like grandmother or mother, and so there's a famous singer named Moeen that does a song Bibi June, which means like dear Bibi, and people are just like playing that and with Bibi's pictures, and they just love him. The second most popular person in Iran is actually Trump, but some people think Trump's more popular, some people think, and then more popular than the both of them is the Crown Prince.
Tell me why.
The Crown Prince, it's interesting. I was at CPAC and 4,000 Iranians were just dying to come to CPAC and to meet him. And the Iranian culture, they love to, glorify. It's a very hierarchical culture, and they love a king. They love one leader. They're not, our culture just doesn't mesh well with democracy. Is what at least constantly, not democracy the way it is. It's just, and the reason for that is that we have a culture that breeds a lot of alphas, and not just men that are alphas, but women that are alphas. Iranian women are some of the toughest. My mom, she was the boss of the family. Almost every Iranian family, the woman is the boss. Iran's one of the only countries where women don't take their husband's name. They keep their maiden name. Iran is very progressive, and women in Iran are not submissive. They're not Japanese. They're not Chinese. They're not Koreans. They're not submissive. We call them shirdokh, which means like a lion, like a female lion. They're tough. And these tough women have been kept down and tried to be forced to be submissive. It's not their nature to be submissive. Iranian women are some of the toughest. Like the only person in the world I'm scared of is my sister.
I love that.
Iranian women are tough. And these women have been kept down and try to be, canceled or trying to be subdued and try to be, turned into something they're not. And they just can't. This movement is led by Iranian women. Iranian women are some of the toughest human beings in the world. And, it's I don't know any other culture where the women are so tough.
Did you have any pressure to marry someone within your own culture?
No, not at all. Both my sisters are married to, one's married to a South African guy who was, here since he was a young kid. And the other one's married to, another great guy who was born and raised in Dallas. So, my nieces are all, you wouldn't know they're Iranian. They're blonde, blue eyes, And, by the way, my grandfather who played soccer for Iran's national team, he was 6'3" and blue eyes. So he didn't look very Iranian either. But no, I never, my mom and dad always thought, marry whoever you like. They didn't believe in any of that.
That's cool that you had the freedom.
I personally have had a preference to date anyone except Persian because Persian women are tough. They call my BS. I can't deal with them.
Oh, that's great. I love that. Well, tell me a little bit about your podcasting journey, and I want you to kind of promote what you're up to as well.
So listen, I and it was very nice of Benji to include me in a lot of his events. We've become good friends. I've become good friends with a lot of people that I ran against. I was a no-name, came out of nowhere. No one even knew I existed. People in East Texas, this old gentleman pulled me aside and he goes, listen, until today, I had no idea who you were. And let me tell you, those 7 candidates in there, you did really well in there. He goes, if the election was today, I would vote for you. But let me tell you, your name is a problem. Your name, your first name and last name, I'm just going to be honest with you, your name is a problem. Now, if I voted for you, 42 other people will vote for you, but I just encourage you to stay in the fight because we need people like you. The Cherokee Rose women of Upshur County, amazing people. They sent me a nice note. They said, we know you're going to have a bright future in politics. We really appreciate you coming. We didn't endorse you because, we endorsed the person that was endorsed by President Trump, and that's, who we wanted, but we really liked you. And we hope you come run for state senate and help us with the water issue here in Upshur County, and you're always welcome here.
I love that so much. Can I just tell you, I honestly didn't know who you were either. But after I heard you speak, I was like, I want to interview that guy. Like, you were my favorite one that I listened to. I was really taken aback by you. I wanted to let you know that I stand with you. And if there's any way that I can help or encourage, that's why I wanted to reach out and have you on my podcast. I was completely inspired.
I think a lot of Iranians, when I did Tommy Robinson's show, I said, I thought the stupidest word in the English language was Islamophobia. And there's no such thing as Islamophobia. Phobia is when you have irrational fear of something. But, this fear of Islam that the Iranian people have, 90 million people have inside and outside Iran, it should be called Islamic trauma, because we have a very rational fear of being murdered, killed, our eyeballs gouged out, tortured, and gang raped. And we all suffer from trauma. That's why every Iranian right now is paralyzed. They're all reaching out to me and other people because they're glued to the news. They're like, God, please don't let President Trump make a deal with these crazies, because the minute he makes a deal with these crazies, their focus is off on survival, and they're going to start killing all the people that they've said it on TV. Like, as soon as we're done with the U.S., we're coming after you. And those people of you that didn't speak out in front of, spoke out against us, one by one, we're coming after you. They're threatening people outside of Iran that, we're going to seize your property. We're going to seize, all of that, right? So they're just death cult. They're not interested in living a peaceful existence with people. And they're invaders. Most of them are not Iranian. Most of them are from Iraqi descent, from Syrian descent, from Indian and Afghani descent. And they can't even get their own IRGC thugs to kill the people, so they have to bring mercenaries from Iraq and Syria and other places and Afghanistan to kill the people. And it's sad. And right now, the Iranians, they fought an 8-year, 9-year war with Iraq, and 1 million people from each side died. 2 million people died, and the whole thing was, we're never going to allow the Iraqi flag to fly over Iran. Well, guess what? Flying over the Freedom Square right now, they took all the Iranian flags and they're flying the Iraqi flags. And the people are like, you hypocrites, you fought an 8-year war against Iraq, and then you're going to let all these thugs come here and fly the Iraqi flag over our Freedom Square? Your problem with the U.S. was, U.S. had too much influence on us, and, they were in charge of our oil. But then you gave away all your oil to Russia, and you gave it away to China below prices, and then you spend all that money on terrorism. And then one of the things that the Islamists hated about the Shah is that he gave women the right to vote. And now the stupid liberals here are defending them. The reason they had a revolution is because they didn't want women to have the right to vote. They didn't like that the Shah did that. And now, you talk about morality and covering your head, but there's more prostitution in Iran than any other country. It's legalized prostitution, where the mullahs are in charge of the brothels. I mean, it's like, you cared about all these things that you talked about, that you cared about, you've done 100 times worse of your own rules of morality. Like, how are you moral when, showing a piece of hair is a problem, but then you're putting women into prostitution? How are you care about morality when you're gang raping nurses? How do you care about foreign invasion when you allowed every terrorist thug to come in Iran and take over Iran? So people see this. People are not stupid, and these guys are they're hypocrites. By the way, there's a lot of homosexuality that goes on in the Islamic circles. Pornhub put out a report that the most amount of gay porn that was consumed in the world was out of Pakistan. In Iran, there was a guy who was there's IRGC, and then there's a Basij. There's a guy that was a Basij, a volunteer militia, right? And this guy was on a hidden camera with his face blocked out, and he basically blew the whistle that the mullahs are the older guys, and then the Basij are younger boys, and they basically have these meth parties that are giant orgies. There's like hundreds and hundreds of these old mullah men and younger Basij boys, and they smoke meth, and it's just a giant orgy. And then he just thought it was crazy, because the next day, the Basij are going killing people, and the mullahs are on the pulpit like everything's fine. And one of the reasons they're able to just indiscriminately kill so many people is because they're high on meth. It's like the Nazi regime, exactly what the Nazis did, right? And I actually saw during the January 8th, January 9th, there was a sniper on the roof. Somebody zoomed in, and the guy had a sniper rifle, and he was smoking a glass pipe. There's just a lot of drug use going on. And by the way, the Ayatollahs, they're all high on opium. The Israeli woman that had kind of infiltrated the Khamenei's office, she said that from the time he gets up to the time he goes to sleep, he's smoking opium. These are the people that you're negotiating with. The guy that's like on a different planet. She said that he thought he was God.
That's wild. What can the average person do, though, to speak up or to get involved? I mean, do we really have a voice?
Listen, in terms of U.S. politics, one of the things that I'm doing is Iranian Americans are some of the most successful people in the United States. All do well financially, they all own businesses. Generally, Iranians are business owners. Very similar. And by the way, there's a lot of Iranian Jews, but very similar to the Jewish culture. They're business owners. Not a lot of them are working at corporations. A lot of them like to own their own businesses. We're just a business culture, right? And so generally, you're conservative and you're pro-business. You hate Marxism and communism because it goes against all your beliefs, right? And Iranians are generally pretty conservative. And they've been fooled by the left to vote for, these lefties, based on their color of their skin, on identity politics. And some of them are still brainwashed. But today they realize that nobody would ever lift a finger. President Bush wouldn't even send a tweet in support of the protesters. That's all they wanted. They just wanted a tweet, say, hey, I support you. And he wouldn't do it. Obama handed them $150 billion and tried to hand nukes to these crazy Islamists who, by the way, indiscriminately threw missiles on every one of their Muslim country neighbors. The most important thing that I think, there's 2 million Iranians that are citizens in the United States. They're all voters. In Texas, less than 8% of them vote. In California, less than 4% of them vote. And they all have this duty, but they're just not very involved in the political process, and they don't even understand the primary process, the deadlines on the primary, the runoff process, the Republican versus Democrat, local politics, city council. Iranians are the least represented people in politics in the United States. We just got our first Iranian American woman who became Congresswoman, who, by the way, her name is Stephanie Bice. People don't even know she's Iranian. She's a Republican in Oklahoma. And the second Iranian that was, she claims she's the first, is a woman named Yasmin Ansari, who was born here, whose mother and father are tied to lobby organizations that are Islamic Republic lobby organizations, allegedly. There's 2 billionaire brothers who, by the way, they just sued me. I have a lawsuit that they filed against me for reposting an article in the Washington Free Post that said that they give money to a lot of Jewish organizations that are anti-Israel. These brothers, one's worth $3.2 billion. His name is Jamshid Najafi, and he's 10% owner of the Phoenix Suns and Formula One team, and he's trying to buy, the UK Tottenham. Where's all this money coming from? People should go figure it out. And the other brother is worth $1.2 billion, and he's building a 7,200 acre ski community in Park Cities, Utah. The minimum home in that community is $5 million. This is a several $billion project. Where is all that money coming from? Could it be legitimate? Sure. But should we ask questions? Him and his brother have, according to FEC filings, have given over $1 million to the Islamic Republic lobby, that the Islamic Republic claimed that they're their own lobby in Iran. In an interview, it's called NIAC, and NIAC Council and NIAC Action. The other organization, they basically try to hire their tracks better, created a new organization called the Quincy Institute. One of these brothers was on the board of the Quincy Institute. So and they're trying to silence me because they're trying to brush it on the table so people don't go questioning them. Well, let me tell you, I'm not holding back. So I'm setting up an organization. I already set it up. There's a 38-year-old organization in California called Iranian American Republican Council. And the first member was the honorary member, which is Ronald Reagan. And I just started the Texas chapter, so Iranian American Republican Council, Texas chapter. I just added a cowboy hat on top and to the Republican elephant. And so my goal is, this is going to be a 501c4. We're going to endorse candidates. We're going to vet candidates. A lot of Republicans here in Rockwall and other places, now they've gotten to know me, are asking me, hey, vet this candidate, vet that candidate. One of the things I said on the campaign trail, people said that I was a fake, that, Tawfiq, whatever it's called, where you pretend that you're not a radical until you get in office and then you turn and you do Islam favors. They were accusing me of that. And I said, listen, actually, that's a good thing that your alarm bells are high because I was born in Iran. Promise me one thing. Don't vote for me, but promise me you will never vote for a Muslim candidate for anything. Not for a water district, not for a city council, not for even a school board. Nothing. If you, think I'm doing Tafika, whatever it's called, and you don't vote for me, but you promise you don't vote for any Muslim candidates, then I've won. And so, by the way, there's a lot of peaceful Muslims in the world. There's a lot of peaceful Muslims that don't practice, or Muslims that are not radical, that they moved here to, by the way, guess who their biggest fear is they moved here to get away from the crazy Islamists. They're Muslim, but they've been persecuted by Islam. The biggest victims of the radical Islam is Muslims. I mean, look, there's a reason the 50 million Muslims have fled to Europe, because their countries are not treating them right. They're mismanaging, they're dictators. And then in that mix, slip in the radicals, and then the radicals do their things. And then the peaceful Muslims, they stay quiet. So they're to blame. So we need to get all the peaceful Muslims to pick a side. They either pick the side of Western civilization and living and having a great life, or picking the side of a death cult that wants to nuke the whole world. They have to make a decision. And my job is, one, to wake those Muslims up, wake Americans up that, hey, they're telling you what their plans are. They're telling you. They're not hiding it. They're telling you. Listen to them. All I'm saying is listen to them. But more importantly, we're going to go and vet candidates, and we're going to endorse candidates. And if there's 4 candidates that are all Republican, well, first they have to be Republican before we endorse them. 2, if they're Republican, we want to know who's conservative. We're not going to vote for any rhinos. We're going to vote for conservatives whose values match with the Iranian Americans who are here, who are conservative, who are pro-business. And then lastly, if there's 2 conservatives and they all have the same exact qualifications, who is better in representing the Iranian American issues, which is fighting radical Islam, 1, and being supportive of President Trump's regime change plans in Iran. As long as they meet those 2, then we vet them and we endorse them. Right now, people are asking me who they should vote for mayor of Frisco. There's a lot of Iranians and Indians in Frisco. The Iranians and Indians, by the way, very similar situations. They're scared of radical Islam. They don't want Islamification to ruin their home country to come here. So between Iranians and Indians, we can win the Frisco mayor's race. There's a gentleman named Rod Wilhour who's fighting radical Islam. Most likely, that's who we're going to nominate. Another gentleman is running for Congress or for state senate into Plano. We're going to vet him. Somebody came up to me, I think, at that event, and I think he's running for mayor of Plano. There's a lot of Iranians in Plano. So more importantly, 2 million Iranian Americans in the United States, 200,000 Iranian Americans that can vote in Texas. The Ken Paxton vote, the Beau French. Iranians, if I could mobilize them, we're going to tilt elections. Whoever the Iranians pick, if it comes down to between Paxton and Cornyn, I get 200,000 Iranians mobilized, even 20% of them mobilized. We're going to tilt an election. So people are going to pay attention. And this is some really, really important firepower that we have as Iranian Americans. And today, we're very vocal. We are thankful what President Trump and Netanyahu have done for Iran. And even a lot of Democrats that were Iranian have now moved to the Republican Party. We saw that at CPAC. It was the biggest showing ever of one particular group ever in CPAC. A couple thousand Iranians showed up. So my job is I'm going to get involved, and I'm going to mobilize these people, and I'm going to show them how much political power that they have that's been untapped. The Iranians that are Republicans don't vote. The ones that were Democrat, now we're going to make Republican. And most importantly, I'm going to make sure that they're all registered to vote. They know the deadlines. They know the process. Educate them, all of them, and hopefully they will vote Republican. But most of them, I think, have a lot of motivations right now to make sure President Trump doesn't lose the midterm, and the House Democrats force him to make a bad deal and get these IRGC terrorists to survive in Iran. That's the biggest threat to Iran right now. And this race in Texas, this midterms in Texas, is do or die for Iran. And I'm trying to educate people that, hey, you want to make a change, you're going to a rally, that doesn't really change anything. You sign up change.org petitions that's owned by leftists, and Bill Gates and Richard Branson and Reid Hoffman run it. They're just collecting your data. Do it at your own peril. I'm not saying do or don't, but I don't think that's going to, it's like, hey, pretty please don't kill us,
What moves the needle, though?
What moves the needle is Iranians get involved in the political process. That moves the needle. So that's number 1 goal. Number 2 goal, NIAC and the Quincy Institute, these are 2 lobby organizations that are tied to the Islamic Republic. Now, loosely tied, their goal is, they're the ones that negotiated. NIAC is the one, the guy named Trita Parsi that started NIAC and also started the Quincy Institute. NIAC in 2002, Quincy Institute in 2019. He came from Sweden, and he, long story about him. I can fill a whole podcast about him, but he's been their golden boy. He's the one that negotiated the JCPOA. Or introduced the people that negotiated JCPOA, Javad Zarif. He's the one that, the Obama administration gave him legitimacy, and they're a pretty powerful lobby in Washington. They were created to be anti-APAC. The whole existence of NIAC is the Islamic Republic, and they're not hiding it. In Farsi interviews in Iran, they say, we created NIAC to fight APAC. The whole goal was anti-APAC. So now I'm going to create a lobby organization to be anti-NIAC and anti-Quincy. I'm going to be the anti-anti, right? So we need to be organized. And because I'm familiar with the FEC filings, with the political process, fighting them exactly the way they're fighting, they're very sophisticated. I think I can add a lot of value mobilizing people, having resources, money resources, legal resources to go fight these people tooth and nail. And their goal, was to get Iran nuclear weapons. Today, their goal is different. Their goal is to help the Islamic Republic survive. So if they survive, then they regroup and then they come back and try to nuke Israel again. They have zero interest in using nuke as a deterrence. As soon as they have a nuclear weapon, they're going to blow up Tel Aviv. That is their goal. They've been saying it for 47 years. Why are you not listening to them? They're not hiding it. They're like, we have a nuclear weapon. We're going to blow up Tel Aviv. That's the goal. So the whole threat of mutual destruction regime that the United States and Soviet Union have had since the Cold War, that doesn't work with a death cult. A death cult doesn't care that if they nuke Israel nukes them back and 90 million Iranians die. They don't care about 90 million Iranians. They're killing them indiscriminately. They're shooting 50 caliber weapons at them. You think they care about the people? No. All they care about is staying in power and using Iran's natural resources and money to steal elections in Europe and all over the world to create this Islamic caliphate whose plan is to enslave the rest of the world who's not Muslim. That is the plan. And, enough people need to hear this to wake up. Wake up.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I love that your dad, too, is a part of it. Like, he's one of your whys for doing it. That's really cool.
One last story. My dad, when he was in the Air Force in Iran, he was there and he always just stopped because he did all his training in the U.S. And, he had an Israeli counterpart. They were allies with Israel. They were allies with the U.S. They just always thought Israel and the U.S. was going to come save them. And even the whole time he was like serving under these mullahs, they're like, they're going to come. The day that he just crushed them was, I remember I was a kid, he comes home, and that was the day Oliver North flew in a Huey helicopter, landed at Mehrabad Airport with 4 other people. They brought a cake and a General Patton Colt 45 to the Rafsanjani to tell him, we're going to sell you weapons under the Iran-Contra. When my dad saw that the U.S. was selling weapons to the mullahs, he was like, we got to figure out how to get the heck out of here. There's no saving Iran. He knew that moment. And so, I got, a lot of historical things in my life, like watching the Berlin Wall come down or my dad being there when Oliver North landed in Mehrabad Airport. These are just things that I don't forget. And my dad just knew a lot. He just knew a lot. And he knew that the liberal media in the U.S., Barbara Walters would go interview the Shah and say, oh, you have all these political prisoners. You're a dictator. Not a single one of these reporters have ever gone and talked about the 45,000 people that got massacred. All they talk about is their talking points about 166 students in the school that died, which, by the way, they were using that school to hide anti-aircraft guns and missiles. And the IRGC has admitted that they're the ones that actually blew it up. But that's all they talk about. The U.S. killed 166 kids. But they never mentioned the 45,000 people that were raped, tortured, and killed, the 10,000 people that were blinded. They make them blind on purpose so they can't fight. And then 330,000 people that were injured who, even if you're a nurse that treats them, you get killed and raped. There was a woman, this is a sad story. There was a woman that was a nurse, and they came into her house, and she was fighting, and they shot her and killed her. And then they took her and filmed a video of them having sex with her dead body and sent they used her thumbprint to get in her phone and sent those disgusting videos to her husband, so much so that the husband couldn't, stand it. He committed suicide. I mean, these are disgusting people. People need to understand how disgusting these human beings are. There was a firefighter. They just did a ceremony in Virginia. The amazing fire department in Virginia paid tribute to this firefighter. This firefighter ran into the line of fire, put a person that was injured on his back, and ran out, and they killed him. And these are the people that are heroes, that are going and fighting against a government that's tyrannical, that's a cult, that's interested in the end of the world. And these people are fighting them with no weapons, with their bare hands, with their voice. And we need to be their voice. So Iranians are not going to be quiet. I'm not going to stop talking about radical Islam. I'm not going to, I get death threats all the time. I get lawfare put against me. They don't know who they're dealing with. I'm going to take them down.
I love it. I love it. Let people know how they can join your mission and stand with you.
Sure. The organization is called Iranian American Republican Council, Texas chapter. We have an Instagram page. We're about to set up a website. I want people to go and volunteer to help and be involved. We're going to get recognized under the Texas GOP as a chapter, as a political organization, and then the lobby organizations. There's a group in Houston that set up the John Adams Initiative PAC that's supposed to help these causes, and then under that they have set up a website called We Are Cyrus. Under We Are Cyrus, people can join to volunteer to help. So my goal is, there's a lot of Iranians with a lot of resources. I'm going to mobilize them all. We're going to have a political voice. We're going to be very involved. And this one part where we've just been really, really bad at, which is political involvement, I'm going to change that.
I love it. That was really good.
You've heard from my mom. Now, let's switch it over to Grandpa.
All right. I brought you an American Dream guest, Abteen.
Abteen, really, not only did he do a magnificent job, but he is actually giving you what every person on earth wants, is the opportunity to have a road to freedom, and where you can have your family safe, and where the world has a chance to progress, where all peoples can get along, and where we have a culture that stimulates that. And that's what the American dream is all about. That's why people like to come to America. However, is America a place to bring your culture to, change America for the worse? Or do people have to be able to come to America to be part of these ideals, okay, of respecting people, loyalty, to have an opportunity to build a future and be progressive? But it goes to show you that also he gives you the flip side of the coin, that if you have a philosophy of oppression and terror, that's not only not a place in America, but that's not a place for anywhere in the world. We need to escape that type of oppression and supplication, whatever the word is. He's bringing up a couple of events that he experienced himself, the oppression of having to escape Iran, where his father was in the service, where he was defending Iran, defending the country. However, when a government becomes so radicalized, which is something that we have even in our own country, where we have people that have lost it, have gone so far to the left, that's what's jeopardizing freedom in America. And when you allow people to come in here that actually hate the country and actually are undermining the country from within, we better wake up, because sometimes you think that you're safe in your own country, but terrible things can happen anywhere in the world, but even in your own country, if we let evil and totalitarianism take over. We have to be able to fight and build a community, not tear it down, and not where people are afraid to even go out on the streets. And it's not just protection from people that are trying to steal from you or murder you, but if your government is doing that to you, how do you fight back? How do you fight back? Because if you go to the streets, some of these countries, they just take out their machine guns and mow you down in the streets. Very hard to fight when you most likely will lose your life in fighting. So the herd stays behind the fence. It stays behind the cage, because still you're safe and you get to live a little bit, even though you're oppressed and you're caged up. And it's happened to many people throughout history. The reason why they don't fight back is that they don't want to be murdered. They don't want to just be shot down in the streets. So the answer is is that you have to be able to rise up above these type of governments all throughout history. And what does Abteen say? I've lived through it. I understand it. I know the difference between different cultures, and I choose freedom. I choose people to have a chance to progress with their lives. I choose learning. I choose developing myself. But not only that, but I want safety, and I want to see the whole community grow. And when you live in a country where your vote can be a powerful tool, well, then we have to be able to go to the streets, not with weapons, but to go out with our voices constructively and be able to have other people join the cause. And when you've experienced terror and you've experienced oppression and you've experienced escaping, being almost like a slave, but once you have that experience and you've shown that you can rise above it, guess what? People love to follow people that have overcome these adversities. And that's why he's a tremendous spokesman, is because he's real. And
He's made for it.
He's made for it. He's a champion.
Oh yeah.
And he's willing to go out there on the streets with his voice and express himself because he's knowledgeable and experienced and hands-on. And he understands the cultures of so many different countries. And he knows what's up and he knows what's down. And being down isn't fun. But his father was willing to sacrifice everything to escape the tyranny of Iran. And yet, his father would love to see that freedom as well back in Iran. And look how he glorifies Trump and Netanyahu, which you would think are his enemies. And yet, they're also giving Iran an opportunity to be free. But when they went to the streets before the attack by Israel and the United States, they just mowed them down in the streets. There's people in China that would like to be free too, but they'll mow you down in the streets because they're holding the leverage and the guns. And if you weaponize terrorists and you weaponize people that have no feeling for their own people or for life itself, that's a very dangerous situation. Very dangerous. And when evil is at a level like what Hitler did, it's like being in, I gave you this example before. If you were in a forest and it's 120 or 125 degrees and it's as hot as hell, and somebody lights a match, that can cause a disaster. And millions of people can die when that happens, just like millions and millions of trees can burn down if those type of conditions exist. And the only way to put out a major fire like that is to be more preventive and make sure that evil doesn't get to that level. And that's what Abteen is trying to tell you also, is that we want to be able to assimilate from evil to good. And America's values and the American dream is what everyone in the world should be seeking, including us.